Hello and welcome everybody to another episode of Pod Strickland. I'm your host, Shwin, and this episode 471. I'm joined, as always, by my co-host Stacy. That is at StacyPatton89 on Twitter. Stacy, how you doing?
Doing pretty well. How about yourself?
Can't complain other than about the Knicks. Well, actually, I could probably complain about a few other things, but I don't think we're here to talk about those things. We're here to talk
Don't
about
you just
basketball.
miss Ronald Reagan?
The golden age is upon us here. So we're just gonna stick to sports, shut up and dribble, and all those things. All right. Before we get started, I do have to make a few announcements. First, Strickland has a YouTube channel where you may be watching this podcast. If you are and have done so already, please hit like, subscribe to the channel, leave us a comment. That'd be a huge help to us. The Strickland also has merchandise, which you can find on our website at www.thestrick.land. There's a link that'll take you to the merchandise store, and there's all kinds of cool stuff that you can find on there, like t-shirts, sweatshirts, hats, coffee mugs, water bottles, you name it, we got it. Strickland. So as a Patreon, which you can subscribe to, there are a number of different tiers. There's a $6 tier that gets you access to Pod Strickland's podcast that I host every Friday with Prez. You also get access to Takes from My Bozo's a podcast hosted by Andrew Steele, aka Doug, along with Zach Blatter, and you get access to the Strickland Discord where the conversation never stops. So there are further tiers. There's a $9 tier that gets you access to Strickland Roll, my solo pod where I rant and rave about the next year more. You also get access to wonderful premium articles by Matthew Marino, one of the best in business, and you get access to Strictly NFL, which you guessed it is a podcast with the NFL that is hosted by Konstantin Mechkos and Desmond Novak. There are further tiers. It's a $15 tier, $30 tier, $50 tier, and a $100 tier that's come with a variety of additional benefits, like listening on our pod recordings and merchandise discounts, and even potentially co-hosting a podcast alongside yours. True limited, whether you choose to subscribe to unwillingness.you and unwillingness.bet.online. BetOnline is the world's most trusted betting platform, your number one source for online betting in 2025. Whether you're a seasoned fan or a first-time bettor, BetOnline is your ultimate game day companion with the largest selection of odds on everything from NBA and college basketball to the NHL and UFC. BetOnline continues to be your number one sports betting source from every three-pointer to hat trick. BetOnline has you covered with odds, stats, and more. Every game, every play, and every win. BetOnline, the game starts here. Knicks lost last night to the Golden State Warriors. 114-102. Karl Anthony Towns missed the game. He has some kind of personal issue. Don't want to speculate on what that is. Hopefully, he takes the time that he needs. And when the Knicks get him back, that'll be great. But until then, they have to make the best of their situation. And things don't get easier. They go on the road. They play the Lakers, who are red hot on Thursday. But what I would say is that I don't think losing to the Warriors after they've gotten Jimmy Butler, and I know they're in the second night of back-to-back. I don't care, man. They played the fucking Hornets the night before. Like, if we were in the same situation as them, I don't think we'd be like, oh, man, a brutal back-to-back. If we win this, what a miracle. Like, I don't care about that. I don't think it gave them a huge disadvantage at all. I would rather be on the second night of a back-to-back with Karl Anthony Towns than not have a back-to-back and not have Karl Anthony Towns. That said, it's not a terrible loss. Like I'm fine in terms of like I can understand you lose this game. I don't think this is like you didn't lose to the fucking Wizards or something. But I don't know how often we can say this, but it's like every time the Knicks lose, it's the same exact fucking things we talk about constantly. And yesterday, it's the same exact shit that cost in the game. Same stuff. Like, you're not getting matched up in transition. Why? And this happens most frequently when the starters are on the floor. How have you guys played the most fucking minutes in the league out of any 5-man lineup? 4-man lineup, I guess, in this case. And yet, constantly, nobody has any fucking idea how they're just forget like actual coverages in the half court. I'm talking about just matching up when the ball is coming down the floor. Not getting matched up in transition, not getting back in transition. These are like just basic things that they routinely screw up. And then to exacerbate it, there are a couple of things, right? Mitch Robinson's still on a minutes limit. He's still definitely getting his legs under him. You could see it, I think, on some of his timing on rebounds and stuff around the rim, both offensively and defensively. So that doesn't help. And then Precious is just playing really, really poorly right now. It is what it is. And to be clear, yesterday, they're like, I mean, we can get to like, should he have played OG at the 5 more and run some small lineups? I think absolutely. But regardless, with Cat out, with Huck Porty out, Precious was going to have to see some time at the 5. Like, there's no way around that. So that doesn't help the cause. But what really is killing them, and I guess I do believe this. I think Josh Hart is killing them right now in defense. I think he's been awful on defense I think he's been bad, or at least subpar, average at best. for most of the season. I would say the last month or so, he's been awful, like really bad. I think in that time, the only games I can remember being like, man, he played good defense was the Pacers game, which was before the All-Star break, and then the final kind of quarter and overtime of the Miami game on Sunday night. Other than that, it's just been pretty bad to me across the board. And I'm sure if somebody's listening to this and it's like, oh no, he actually played really well in this quarter or whatever. The point is, we shouldn't be talking about this in quarters. Like, you make these moves, right? Okay, this guy's gonna like, Cat sucks on defense, Brunson's a liability on defense, but these three other guys, they hold up their end of the bargain, we can be okay. Well, right now, look, OG Anunoby and Mikal Bridges at various points of the season have come in for criticism, justifiably so. Josh Hart is not doing his job. He's not. He is being, first of all, 1 of 8 from the field yesterday. Absolutely brutal. Here's how you know he had a terrible game. These are a couple things that happened last night. Just gets absolutely burned by Brandon Podziemski multiple times to start the game. Like, I have no idea what he was trying to do on some of these plays. Just gets burned by him multiple times. Then probably maybe the low point of, I don't even want to say his season as much as I want to say his entire professional career. He gets bodied off the spot by Kevin Knox. Real thing that happened. Real thing I witnessed in a basketball game. Josh Hart getting bodied off his spot by Kevin Knox. He's had these weird possessions all like throughout this stretch where he's ran. Like, this is a guy whose physicality is like fundamental to who he is as a player. Like, that is the core identity of who he is as a player. And way too often recently, you're seeing him get easily brushed off, bodied off spots. He's not winning the 50-50 balls, maybe like he has earlier this season. I don't know what's going on with him. And to be fair to him, he has been dealing with, we know he's been on the injury report with some knee stuff. So maybe that's, he missed 2 games after the All-Star break. Maybe he's feeling that right now. Whatever the case may be, in these moments when Josh Hart is playing like a fucking idiot, there is no excuse for Deuce McBride to play 23 minutes. There's none. There is none. And I do not care that him and Brunson are small. Like, I genuinely just cannot care about that. And I'll tell you why I can't care about it. Because if your entire point is going to be like, well, look, yeah, that works sometimes, but it's not going to work against every team in the league. It's like, okay, well, one, let's say that's true. That's fine. Like, let's just go with that hypothetical thing that people like to point out is true. One, can we just try it against all these teams so that we can verify that, so we can know for sure without a shadow of a doubt? Because I don't even fundamentally disagree with it. Like, I don't think that Deuce and Brunson, playing, let's say they played like the lion's share of the minutes in a series against Boston or something. I don't think that that's going to win you the series. I don't know that they'd win their minutes. I don't know those things. But can we just see what playing them a lot more minutes together with 2 of the other wings, with a big, whatever the alignments are overall, can we just see what that looks like in a larger sample with, against a variety of opponents before we just dismiss it based on our hypothesis? Like, test your hypothesis. Let's just not assume the hypothesis is correct. Second, is it the best? Like, let's, even assuming it's not going to raise the Knicks to some championship contending level, right? Like, that change in and of itself is not going to raise the Knicks into contention. If it's still the most optimal use of your personnel for the time being, I mean, it definitely is right now, but even if, when Josh gets the shit together, even at that point, if it's your best lineup, if it's your most effective lineup offensively, defensively, on aggregate, however you want to put it, does it, like, shouldn't you still fucking use it more? Like, that, because it doesn't matter if that means that you're not going to win the championship this year. The entire point is to push your ceiling as far as you can. As far as you can. Because, yeah, you have the personnel you have. So there's always personnel-based limitations on that. Nobody's denying that. There's no pushback on that. That yes, to some degree, Thibs will be held back by personnel limitations because every coach, to some extent, has to deal with personnel limitations and coach around that and do the best they can. If you are coaching this team right now and you cannot see that Josh Hart is killing you defensively, okay, let me just rephrase that because that's probably a little harsh. But he is being a detriment to you defensively for sure. I mean, yesterday he had a horrific game, but yeah, a detriment defensively. And offensively right now, he is in a super funk, has no confidence in his shot, doesn't want to take the shot. Teams are not defending him to take the shot. And that obviously has ramifications for everybody else that's on the floor with him. Like, if you cannot see these things and be quicker with how long your leash is with Josh Hart, then serious questions need to be asked about your decision making as a coach too. Because Josh Hart is a really good player. Very happy the Knicks have him. Thrilled that they got him for the price they got him. The contract is fine. Everything is good about Josh Hart, aside from right now he's struggling. But you're treating him like the way Thibs is treating him right now. It's like we can all understand the importance of Josh Hart, but Josh Hart's importance. This isn't Draymond Green, man. Like, he's not the linchpin of your defense. He's not the linchpin of of what you do defensively or offensively, for that matter. He's a really good player, and he's a player who, I mean, if not for injuries last year, probably would have just remained on as a sixth man, and he would have been a great sixth man, maybe the best sixth man in the league. Maybe he would have won the award for all I know. But treat him like that. And I'm not saying, to be clear, I'm not saying that needs to mean that you bench him, right? You put Deuce in the starting lineup and you bench Josh Hart. But you need to be quicker to see how he's approaching the game, how he's focused to start a game, and make the adjustments when necessary. At the start of each half, both the first half and the second half yesterday, within a minute, 2 minutes, you could see that he was not there. He was not locked in. He was not focused. He was not playing with the proper discipline or intensity. And you should be, as a coach, able, especially a guy, this is a player who you've shown tremendous loyalty in. This is a player who you've coached now for going on this is 2+ seasons at this point. It's going to be 2.5 by the end of this year. You should have the comfort and trust with him and relationship with him where if you pull him from a game early, one, he shouldn't take that personally. And two, you should be able to have the discussion with him like, you're not giving me enough right now. I'm going to go to Deuce. That doesn't mean I'm never going to go back to you. I mean, I'm not saying you sit Hart and never bring him back in the course of a game, but you've got to make it clear to him, like, this is unacceptable. These plays where you're just not defending anybody, don't you have your hand up, don't, closing out wildly, late on rotations, whatever the hell it is. These are unacceptable plays. This is an unacceptable level of performance. And when you don't make that clear, it becomes more consistent. And it has now become a feature of Josh Hart's game, not a bug. And that's very, very concerning because something needs to give there.
Yeah, I mean, it would be. You could make arguments for why he'd be used more in a game like yesterday. Having to play without.
Well, it was somewhat inevitable, right? Yeah.
Having to play without Cat, there's more of a concern on the rebounds. Although you did play Mitchell Robinson more, I think you could have probably, given some of the spacing concerns, staggered Mitchell Robinson and Hart a little bit more in a game like yesterday. And it's worth noting. I think Hart was a game low -22. Most of the starters had poor plus minuses. Deuce was a game high +8, Shamet was actually the game high in plus minus, but he played fewer minutes. McBride played 23 minutes and was a +8 in a game the Knicks lost by, I think, 12. Obviously, in the fourth quarter, it was a close game. So, but those are meaningful data points. With Hart, I think, part of it is just accountability, right? And we've talked before about how that can affect the rest of the team. When you're asking so much of OG and Bridges, that's not to excuse them. That's what the money is for. In the words of John Hamm. But it can be frustrating, right? When you're
You
making
never
these
say
rotations.
thank you.
Do you even say thank you? Um, and even for a guy like Mitch, right? You're busting your ass. You're making every rotation, and there's a guy. I mean, there were 2 threes. I don't know if this is on Hart, right? But Ace from Knicks Film School, or sorry, DJ from Knicks Film School, noted, right, that there were 2 possessions in the fourth quarter, high leverage points in the game, where the Knicks just lost a guy in transition and didn't match up on a 3. It wasn't even transition really, right? The ball was just kind of pushed forward. These are basic attention to detail, and maybe that's not on Hart alone, but you need to hold that kind of behavior accountable, and Deuce gives you that. And I think there's this bias. I don't want to call it a bias, right? Yes, it helps to be all else equal. It helps to be bigger and stronger, right? But you especially look at some of the matchups the Knicks have, right? If they face Cleveland, this is a team that puts out 2 quick, small guards. Darius Garland isn't going to body you. And if you have to use both if you have to use OG and Bridges on them, that creates other issues, with DeAndre Hunter or with some of the other guys they have, or Mobley, right? So you want to be able to. So there are matchups where it actually makes sense to go smaller anyway. But it's also, I think, to your point, it's just really about accountability, right? You have a player who's very talented, who's capable of playing at a very high level, who might even be being overtaxed, right, to be able to do those things. But
Yeah.
I mean, it was 2 points, 1 of 8 shooting. The shooting is stuff you live with from Hart. But when you're not getting those, if you're not going to be a high scoring player, if you're going to be questionable floor spacer, you really can't be leaving things on the floor. You can't be leaving things on the table when it comes to defense. And right now, that's the situation they're in with Josh Hart.
Yeah. And I'm not exactly sure. I just don't know what their pivots are. Like I have an idea of what their pivots not even are, but should be, right? Like, and I'm not gonna claim I'm like some genius and I know everything, and I definitely don't. And this stuff is hard. Like we can sit here and talk about, oh, we can't play Precious and Hart together, and you want to minimize Mitch and Hart together, and all this stuff. But what do you do when Karl Anthony Towns is out of the game and Huck Porty's out, and like you're going to have to eat some shit, right? Like you're gonna have to play some lineups that you go in understanding are suboptimal for whatever reasons, spacing, defensive concerns, rebounding. It can be all variety of things. But what is frustrating is that it seems to be like, at least this is how it comes across to me, just viewing the games obviously as a fan. It feels like we go into the game, like every single game, right? Obviously, we know Jalen Brunson's going to play a lot of minutes, as he should. Cat, right, when he's available, Mikal, OG. It feels like even for all of those guys, there's more. Like we've seen Jalen Brunson not close the entirety of a game, right? Like go back to Christmas Day. Brunson and Cat don't close that fourth quarter for most of it. Brunson comes in at the very end. For most of that fourth quarter, neither of those guys is in. We've seen Mikal Bridges get benched a couple times, right, to close games. OG has not. OG is his own thing. And in the defense of OG, what I would say is that I think the reason why sometimes he doesn't get benched is because he really is the only like actual 4 we have on the roster, right? Like the other guys that play the 4, it's basically Josh Hart or Precious. And Josh we know he can do it. We saw him do it last year, but there are obviously real size limitations. And then he's also not a good shooter. So like OG's a better shooter, so you're not getting a spacing benefit from it either, right? So I can understand why OG's kind of grandfathered in there when available, especially because Precious is we the less said there about Precious on the floor, the better. But for Josh, there is a lack of it this season. Even last year, there were a couple of times where I remember he did not close games, like the game where the Knicks came back from 20 down against Miami in the fourth quarter. Like there are games last year where there were times where he did not close, and that was very much the case early on in the season at points. This year, there hasn't been any of that, and it feels as if Thibs values his rebounding, and I get why he values rebounding because Mikal is not a strong rebounder. OG's not a fantastic rebounder. Brunson obviously has limitations on what he can do in the glass. And so it's just basically your big man and Josh that kind of have to help you get to win the battle. So I understand that, but if you're valuing that over his actual level of play defensively right now, or how teams are defending him off like when we have the ball, and it's crowding space and making things harder for Brunson and Cat, whoever. Like there needs to be an understanding of all these things, and it just feels like Thibs values the rebounding piece of it so much that he'll ride or die with Josh no matter what. And we saw this, like, look, we won the Memphis game. It was an awesome game. I thought it was fucking bananas that Josh Hart closed over Deuce McBride for that game. Or any like I don't, and it didn't even matter to me who you wanted to pull from the game, but Deuce had to close that game. So it could have been Josh, it could have been Mikal, for all I care, could have been whatever. But I think Mikal, I think he's done a pretty good, like he's had a pretty rough string here. His offense, he's in a little bit of a rut offensively for sure, and the lack of physicality from him on offense is a problem. There's no two ways about it. But I thought he did a pretty decent job on Steph Curry yesterday, all things considered. I thought he did a pretty good job on John Morant, all things considered. Like he's having to play these face up against these tough matchups. So if he gets burned sometimes, he gets burned sometimes. But I think he's competing at a pretty high clip right now defensively, certainly better than he has at other points this season. Josh is defending like Brandon Pajemski, man. And he's flat out hurting you defensively, even in that capacity. That's a problem. And I don't know what the solution to me is not just put him to the bench because he's still going to play a lot. There needs to be like, I think the solution, this is just me, I think the solution is, for whatever reason, I don't know the reason. I have ideas of what the reason is. Maybe we can talk about those ideas. But for whatever the reason is, those three wings, Josh Hart, Mikal Bridges, OG Anunoby, together, they are not getting the best out of each other. They do not play the best alongside the other two. Like it's when you split them up and it's two of them that you seem to get the most out of it. And very specifically when it's two of them with Deuce McBride. Now, obviously Deuce McBride can't play 48 minutes. So I'm not advocating for that. I'm not even particularly advocating for him to start, although I think there's a legitimate, there's a legitimate argument for sure to be made that maybe he should start. If there's some, you don't want to ruffle feathers and there's politics to it all, sure, fine, then don't start him. But he should be getting like 30 minutes a game, and you should be trying to make as many of those 30 minutes alongside two of Mikal Bridges, OG Anunoby, Josh Hart. And I feel bad because I feel like I'm singling out Josh Hart, but it's not just Hart, like as we've seen over the course of the year, right? Mikal Bridges has struggled at times. OG Anunoby has struggled at times. So whoever, you want to pull minutes from on a given night, go for it. But Deuce does need minutes. And he's earned that based on his play this season. And forget his fucking play, how the team has played when he's on the floor. That's the whole fucking thing. It's not just about what he is. It's about how he is, if he's impacting the lineups he's in. So, if that's at Josh Hart's expense, so be it. If that's at Mikal Bridges' expense, so be it. I don't really care. He just needs to play more. So I'm not sure. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, let me kind of throw this back to you as well, because an argument, this is not just a Deuce related thing. There is an argument against a lot of these on-off stats, which I've thought of more recently as well. Context does matter, right? And there's a little bit of a if a player is coming off the bench, they're going to be deployed strategically, right? So the argument can be made that with Deuce or with a lot of these guys who have great on-off numbers off the bench, this was the primary debate you had with Quickly. Yes, they're clearly in a lot of. I think with Quickly it was very pronounced because literally every player's shot distribution, particularly the best players, Randall and RJ, their shot quality and distribution was a lot better with Quickly, and it was more than just spacing, right? Obviously, it was a comical comparison to with Alfred Payton on the floor, but he made he allowed guys to really thrive, right? Just with all of the little things he did, all of the kind of ancillary stuff. I don't know that Deuce is that level of player. It's really just a baseline of spacing and good defense. But and there's an argument that in heavier minutes, even that defense might diminish a little bit, right? There's more matchups that he's exposed to that maybe Thibs is hiding him from. There's also just we're seeing with Hart maybe, right, that when you have to play so many more minutes, you don't have quite the same energy as you do playing 25 minutes off the bench. So one, I generally would be interested in your kind of like how you think about on off with those kind of contexts. I think it's just an interesting conversation to have. Even with stars, right? We talk about on off a lot, but I think this was a criticism that was leveled at, for example, Zach LaVine for quite a bit of his career, where his on off would look a lot worse than players on good teams, but and worse than players on some bad teams, right? Because you are kind of carrying the starting lineup, which is worse than most teams you face every night. And your bench unit probably matches up a little bit better with those teams, right? Those kind of things I think sometimes get lost in the on-off convo. Would be interested in your thoughts on that. But I have to say also, when it comes to what you were talking about with just trying stuff, I think the excuse early in Thibs' Knicks tenure, when he wouldn't try things like playing Brunson next to Quickly, it's like that was always the argument we got, right? It was like, well, this team isn't built to win a championship. They're trying to build an identity. There's roster flaws. You can't blame Thibs for that just because he won't maximize. And I don't think we accepted that necessarily, but the team kept doing well, right? Now the argument is, well, they're a championship level roster. You don't have room to experiment. You have to try to win as much as possible. You can't have it both ways, right? At that point. But yeah.
I mean, it's basically like I think what's really fucking annoying to me about this argument, and I mean, I don't even know. I feel like a lot of people just agree with this at this point, but the whole thing with like why Deuce can't start or why you can't play him too much, it's the same exact shit we talked about with Quickly. Like, it's the same exact argument, and I'm like, I am not arguing that they're going to win the championship together. Like, I'm not saying that's your championship backcourt. I would strongly guess it is not your championship backcourt. Okay, that's not my argument. My argument is, if it is the best thing you have right now, and these lineups are awesome, then just try them more. Like, see, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe we're all wrong, and that is the championship backcourt. You can't know until you try something. Like, did the Warriors know Draymond Green was going to be Draymond Green until they were forced to play Draymond Green? No, they didn't. Their plan was to start David Lee. Then they had to play Draymond Green because David Lee got hurt, and I was like, oh wow, this guy might be awesome. Actually, this is pretty cool. Like, you don't know something until you try it. Sometimes the most incredible thing you can possibly happen to your team only happens because you're forced to try something, and you try it and you roll the dice and it works. Like, I don't know what else there is to say other than that. It's we have a massive, massive sample of minutes that the starting lineup is okay. It's not terrible. It's not great. It's okay. But here's what I know, okay? It is ridiculous that we are 61 games in the season. How many minutes do you think the 5-man lineup of Jalen Brunson, Deuce McBride, Mikal Bridges, OG Anunoby, and Karl Anthony Towns have played together?
Isn't it like 1,000 or so?
No. Not the starting lineup. The starting lineup with Deuce instead of Josh Hart.
200.
38 minutes. They played 38 minutes together this year. That is crazy. Like, I don't know what else there is to say other than that. It is absolutely bananas that that's the situation. And in those 38 minutes, I mean, it doesn't matter. It's a 38-minute sample. They've blitz teams or plus 13 or whatever the hell it is. They played 900 minutes without Deuce McBride. Those 4 guys without Deuce McBride on the floor. Presumably that's all Josh Hart, or at least the line share is Josh Hart. Their net rating in that time is plus 3.3. Like, they're good. They're not spectacular. They're nothing special. They're a good lineup without Deuce McBride. But every combination with Deuce and 2 wings and Jalen Brunson is basically amazing. Like, so I don't know. You don't have a great point of attack defender on the team. Deuce McBride is basically your best point of attack defender. He allows you, because he's a good point of attack defender, for your wings now to be able to roam and help and cover spaces and cover gaps. And like, that helps because now you don't have to, you're switching less, and it covers for Jalen Brunson more, and it covers for Karl Anthony Towns more. It just on a very basic surface level thing, it makes sense why having Deuce McBride in the game benefits you so much on defense, alongside those wings, and why those wings benefit playing alongside him. But if we refuse to accept that because he's 6'2" or whatever the hell he is, and Brunson's 6'2", and therefore it's a crime against basketball to consider playing them together, then it is what it is. Like, we're not going to be a particularly strong defense, and we're probably going to have to continue to have the same issues. We see these miscommunications all the time with the starting lineup, all the time. I mean, like, it's honestly stunning to me how often the miscommunications are between the wings, who are supposed to be like kind of buoying the defensive unit there. And for whatever reason, they have just not gotten on the same page this season at all. Whether that's about a lack of communication, a lack of trust, actual just fundamental issues with what they're capable of, I don't know. To me, I would just, based on watching as much basketball of this team as I have, I think it is about communication and trust more than anything. But I do think there is something to simply the idea of, like, you need a better point of attack defender. And also, like, in fairness, you need more point of attack defense, in terms of, it's not fair to ask Mikal Bridges, hey, play all the minutes with Karl Anthony Towns and battle through 75 screens a game, or whatever the hell the number was. Like, like in Lord of the Rings, share the load. Let Deuce McBride play more point of attack defense. Let him take some of that off of Mikal Bridges' plate, off of OG Anunoby's plate, hell, off Josh Hart's plate. Like, and let him take that, because he's fresher than all of them. On top of being a better point of attack defender right now than all of them. Let him take that off their plate, and let them be able to, like, just kind of not have to be on the ball and fight over screen after screen after screen, and also cover for Karl Anthony Towns, who we know struggles anchoring the defense. But are we going to do that? I don't know. Time is of the essence, but I don't see many signs that. I think the best way I can put it is this. I think it's incredibly awkward and weird that in a game where you were shorthanded, Deuce McBride played less than he did in the 2 games prior, where we were pretty much at full strength. Like I think that's incredibly weird, and it speaks to some of the kind of blind spots in Tibbs's logic.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a few things here. So with the miscommunication, one thing I'm hoping will help is Mitchell Robinson being able to quarterback the defense a little bit more. It's he has the rim protection, the actual skills, but it's also like being able to get guys in the right spot. And
sorry for that. Stacy actually had to step out, so just gonna finish this pod up solo. Probably won't be too much longer. Just because I'm not sure what else to really say. I think the Knicks we know what their issues are, and some of these issues are not going to be fixed this year. I did not come into this season believing that they had a very strong chance of contending this year. As has been pointed out by many people, has been argued by many people, well, that's concerning. They went all in. They're not close to these best teams, blah, blah, blah. There are two things at play here. The way they've come out and looked so unprepared and unready at times for how teams are going to defend various lineups that they put out there, right? And most notably, again, not to harp on it, but Josh Hart, Precious, and also Mitchell Robinson probably, but Mitch is different because he's such a force on the offensive glass. I think they have to kind of honor that a little bit more. But they have looked so unprepared for those things. They've looked unprepared just in terms of their focus to start so many of these games. And not just, and it gets exacerbated, right, against the best teams because they're the best teams. But it's been an issue even against lesser teams. They just get away with it because they're so talented. And that doesn't to me, that is about coaching. I'm sorry. Like I just don't know how it can be anything but coaching. If your team is constantly coming out not focused, looking unprepared, not ready for the moment, not ready to meet the requisite levels of energy and focus and intensity that are required against your opponents, that is about coaching. That is about coaching. So that's one thing I would suggest about, well, how could they get to contention if this is where they are as things stand? Also, when you make these big moves and you deplete your depth and your asset pool, you need time to build your depth back out. And the best example of this I can give is Cleveland, right? Cleveland makes their big all-in move for Donovan Mitchell, and you can go back and literally look at the conversations, track kind of like the conversations around Cleveland over the past, basically since the Mitchell trade. So what is that? 3 years ago, right? It goes from, wow, this team is so good now, they can be a contender much faster than people think, to, wow, their depth is awful. I don't know how they replenish it. They have all these issues. Two guys in the front court that probably don't make so much sense together. Two guys in the back court that maybe don't get the best out of each other. This is a huge issue. They spend the 2023 offseason, they add Max Strus and George Niang. And then they go into the last year and they still have issues, right? They still kind of underwhelmed. They go into the playoffs. They had to play this kind of rock fight 7-game series against the Magic, which wasn't particularly encouraging for anybody. And then they get gentlemen swept by the Celtics. And sure, they make a coaching change this offseason, right? They made a coaching change this offseason. They add guys like Ty Jerome, who are fine, but don't, nobody really thinks too highly of them. And they don't really do anything else. And it's like, oh, well, I don't really know what this team is going to be. They're good, but they don't have a bunch. I don't see the championship ceiling. Personnel changes need to be made. Trades need to be made. And lo and behold, we're sitting there, 51-10, or whatever the fuck they are. They profile pretty clearly as a contender. They have the best offense in the league. They shoot a bunch of threes. They shoot a good clip from three. They shoot a good clip from the field. They are a very, very, very strong, well-rounded team. And it took 2 off seasons it took them, and also at this trade deadline, they were able to get DeAndre Hunter for basically 3 second-round picks and 2 swaps that don't matter. Levert's expiring and George Niang. Like, that's, and now we look at this team and rightfully view them as strong contenders. And it takes time, is my point. It takes time. This is not even a cop-out, I don't think. Because I didn't think the Knicks were a contender coming into the season. I think this is just reality. The Knicks, to me, I think it's trending in the direction of Thibs is probably not the coach to get the best out of this team and maximize what he has. I think yesterday is a perfect example of it. That's a game against a team like Golden State where the size issue should not preclude you from playing small in that game, because they're going to be using Draymond a bunch of the 5. You know what I mean? Like, they don't play big lineups all the time. That was a game to go with Deuce McBride more, and like this is why I don't think it's just like a Josh Hart thing. It's a bigger issue than that. It is being more creative, because you could have played Josh as much as you played him yesterday and still had a better chance to win the game by simply understanding, like, you might want a center on the floor, but Precious Achiuwa is not playing well. And Deuce McBride is a better player. He gives you a better opportunity to win the game than Precious does. You might not win the game anyway, but it gives you a better opportunity to do it because he's a better player. He gives you different advantages. Yeah, there might be different weaknesses then as a result, but do the gains you make from playing him over Precious Achiuwa, even in a smaller lineup, outweigh what you lose? I think pretty unanimously, yes. Absolutely. Deuce McBride is a good basketball player. Precious Achiuwa is like a fine 10th, 11th type guy. He's an innings eater. That's what he is. He's an innings eater. He's not a difference maker. Deuce McBride, individually, might not be some standout, holy shit, this guy is amazing. But for whatever reason, the lineups he features in, how he amplifies the strengths of the teammates that he plays with, it all matters. It makes him very, very impactful. When you look at it from the total team wide perspective. So when I see quite frankly, I think, I don't know, I can't say this for sure, but I would venture to guess this. I think Thibs is the only coach in the league who almost never seriously considers playing a lineup without a center in any situation. I mean, he did yesterday for 2 minutes at the very fucking end of the game. You're down 10 with 2 minutes left. That's the only time he routinely does it. That's the one. Those are the only instances, or most of the only instances, where he try Randall at the 5, right? Like, the fact that he just won't ever experiment with that stuff is concerning to me. I think you do need to be willing to experiment with things like that, to give yourself every possibility to match up and throw different looks at different teams. I think the fact that you don't see him ever just throw in his own, mix in different, like, we've seen him just this year not really be willing to mix up his pick and roll coverages, and you don't see him throwing curveballs at teams, throwing things that are unexpected at them, right? We don't see, I think teams know what our actions are going to be offensively. It's very clear. So those are issues. And, he constantly talks about, we want to play with pace when we get the opportunities. We want to run opportunistically. We want to play with flow and all those things. But, like, if your pace is bottom 5 in the league, but you benefit from pace, then I don't know. Something is not clicking there to me. I don't fully get that. I don't fully understand what's going on there. Maybe making a mountain out of a molehill. But I just see a lot of odd things from him, and not just odd things, but these are things we've seen over 5 years of them, where this is who he is as a coach, and he's a really good coach. But is he a coach that gets the maximum out of a team? And by maximum out of it, can he push the ceiling of a team higher? Can he do that? Can he, like, Atkinson took over a team again that but most people, the consensus was, did not have a championship ceiling as currently constructed. And now they look like they have a championship ceiling. Obviously, the proof will be in the pudding. We'll see what they do in the playoffs. And same thing with Thibs, by the way. Like, we can sit here and talk about the regular season all we want. If we go to the playoffs and the Knicks all of a sudden get their head screwed on and they're focused and they come out and they play really, really good competitive basketball, even against a team like Boston or Cleveland or whoever. And you can even I don't think they would win that series anyway, but let's say they lose that series in 6 games, but it's competitive. And you feel like, okay, he's not married to this one lineup or this one alignment or whatever, and he's flexible and he's willing to try things, and he's basically doing whatever he can, right? As a coach, controlling whatever you can control as a coach. Then you would feel good about that. I wouldn't want to fire him then. I'd probably want him to get some real fucking assistance. I'd want him to change up the coaching staff, but I'd be like, okay, I think that this is a good showing. I can deal with that. What I cannot deal with is if you go there and you squeak out a first round series because you're more talented than your opponent, and then you go to the second round and you get your fucking teeth kicked in. That's an issue. That's an issue. And right now, this team, the things that they screw up, right? You talk about matching up in transition, getting back in transition, understanding, fighting through assignments, staying focused defensively in the half court. You know, being able to generate quality shots through your team play versus the fact that you have superlative offensive talent in the form of a Jalen Brunson or a Karl Anthony Towns. Right? Like, those are the things where I don't, I can hope they change. I do hope they change, but you're 61 games in. If they haven't really changed, and in a lot of ways they've regressed, or at least stayed stagnant, I don't know why I should expect that to change now in the last quarter of the season. I think for the most part, you probably are what you are right now. And in the Knicks case, they've had pretty good injury luck so far this year, knock on wood. So more than most teams, you should kind of feel and understand what they are and feel confident about what they're showing you they are. There's no reason to believe there's some hidden upside here, right? The one hidden upside we can talk about is, again, playing Deuce more. I think a guy like Shamet could play more like that, than he has been. He's showing signs of life to me. I like how he's been playing. I think he's giving you pretty decent minutes right now. But these are things that help on the margins, I think, more so than being enough in the aggregate to get you over the top against a team like Boston and probably even Cleveland. I still feel like Cleveland, as good as they are, and I just wax poetic about them, I still don't fully trust the too big thing. And I do think if Mitch can get back to just, giving you a good 20 to 25 minutes a night, I do think the matchups there at least give us a chance in a way that the matchups against Boston, I don't know. To me, they're just not very favorable across the board. Again, hope to be wrong about all of that. That's just what I think. But yeah, I mean, I can sit here and talk about Mikal Bridges needs to do more offensively. I do think he does need to do more offensively. And again, his aversion to contact has been an issue. But I also don't know what we're even doing to kind of get him going offensively. It doesn't feel like there's a targeted plan to make him more of an offensive focus. And that is a problem to me. There's too many sets where he's hanging out in the corner, spotting up on the perimeter with no real clear direction on what he's doing, right? It's just playing off of Brunson's gravity. And there's I'm not saying every play needs to be a set play, design play. Obviously, you don't want to be too controlling as a coach either. But there needs to be more intentionality about what we do offensively in terms of, I don't know. I think if you give up the price you paid for Mikal Bridges, to me, that should indicate a guy that should be your clear-cut third option. And it doesn't feel that way, really, ever. Right? I don't know. I don't really feel that, and I don't think that is encouraging. I think that's wrong, actually. So I don't know. I don't want to repeat. I mean, I don't want to repeat myself. I'm sure I've fucking repeated myself 5,000 times. But you just don't see enough of these lineups that are, I don't know. I don't know what else to say other than that. There's not enough mixing and matching of lineups, and that is very, very frustrating. I just mentioned that the Deuce instead of Hart lineups with the starters has only played 38 minutes. even like Deuce instead of OG Anunoby, right? So Deuce instead of OG Anunoby with the starters. 64 minutes. 112 plus 12.61 net rating, 130.94 offensive rating, 118.32 defensive rating. Look, those numbers probably aren't sustainable, but again, all we have are these small samples because that's all that we're getting, right? Like that's what we're getting. If you do Deuce in the starters in place of Mikal Bridges, so Mikal Bridges off the floor, that group has played 82 minutes, plus 36.18 net rating, 137.5 offensive, 101.32 defensive. Again, probably not sustainable, right? Because that would be the greatest team in the history of basketball by a massive margin. But I'm giving you 3 different samples of Deuce in place of any of the wings, either any one of the wings, and all 3 of those, which have played 82, fucking 67 and 38 minutes, whatever the hell it is, 64 and 38 minutes, all of them are super strong positives. At some point, that's just it makes no sense to not try it more. I'm sorry. Like, to not give these lineups more time. And really, forgetting that, to use Deuce to give each one of these wings a little bit more rest, right? Because now, you have a decent enough idea here that, yeah, Deuce in place one of those wings seems to be a fine lineup. It just doesn't make sense to me. It doesn't compute. I don't get it. 61 games into the season, like, none of those combinations has played even 100 minutes yet. I don't know. It doesn't really make sense to me. Yeah, I don't know. We got to see what happens here. Obviously, to close the season, hoping that whatever it is improvement. I mean, and look, it's not all bad. So I do want to be like, I think it's easy for all of us, myself included, at times to feel despondent after losses, especially against some of these better teams. But like the Knicks are good. They're 40 and 21. Obviously, they've got real issues to figure out for the end of the season. We'll see how they address those. But this is a good team. I think there's good talent here. There's good pieces here. I don't think they're being maximized by the coach. And I think maybe to fully get the best out of this group, you might need a new voice. That's not going to happen this season. So there's really no point in harping on that right now. I don't even think you can make the determination until after the season, until after the playoffs, rather, I should say. See how that plays out. But I think there's a lot here still. I don't think the book is closed on this team. They will add pieces as time goes on. They will replenish their depth. They obviously drafted 4 guys. Huck Porty looks like a guy who can at least be in your rotation. We have to see what happens with Tyler Kolek and Pacome Dadier and Kevin McCullough, who's now getting back on the court for Westchester, has looked pretty decent. It's G League, so take it for what it's worth. But yeah, I mean, I feel good about those things, but they're not the finished product as much as people will, yeah, it's copium. You're wrong, and you wouldn't do all these trades if you didn't plan to contend this first year. And at some point, it's like I'll just have to agree to disagree, because I think there's a lot. I think it's too simple to boil it down like that. And quite honestly, I trust this front office to figure things out, because that's what they have done. And I think they need time. That's it. Like, I think they need time, and they deserve time. They deserve the benefit of the doubt to figure that stuff out, given how far they've brought us so far. But again, I got to say this, and I'll close with this. I think Leon has done a fantastic job. I think he's done an amazing job. I still don't think he gets enough credit from local or national media for the job he's done turning around a franchise that was basically the laughing stock of the league when he took over. Obviously, I disagree with people that try to minimize what Thibs has done for this team, and I will openly admit that I at times am guilty of that as well. Like, I wanted him fired after the 21-22 season. I wanted him fired early on in the 22-23 season. I wanted him fired after the 23 playoffs. So I'm not somebody who has been his biggest fan and unwilling to criticize him. But I think it's wrong, and I was wrong at times, to dismiss what he has done as far as helping to turn things around, making this team a serious basketball outfit on the floor. Those things are real, and he deserves plenty of credit for what he's done. But there comes a time as an organization where you've got to really make a decision of like, does this guy have what it takes to get us over the top? And I understand that there's a loyalty factor to Thibodeau from Leon Rose, right? That was a client of his. It's also the first guy that he hired here. It's the only guy he's hired here. It's the guy he's backed at times where there's been a lot of external criticism of him. And the reporting suggests that they were seriously considering moving on from him during the 22-23 season early on before he made a significant rotation change that turned the season around. So is he a sacred cow? I don't know. But again, if get to the playoffs, you play a team like Boston and it doesn't even look like you guys are in the same fucking ballpark. Like, look, man, I think it's fair to say Boston's a better team. But those games being a complete fucking joke for like, what, 12, like we played them 12 quarters, at least like 10 of those quarters, you're just like, yeah, they're not even a fucking game here. For it to be like that, yeah, I'm sorry, that's not good enough. And to me, that's not representative of the talent of the team. I get the limitations, but you cannot tell me that getting your fucking shit rocked every time you play one of these top end teams, yeah, well, that's fine because there are limitations and it's not really on Thibs. I'm sorry, that's unacceptable. That's a clown. That's a clown show. And we'd never hold players to that standard either, right? Like if Josh Hart plays like shit against Boston, I'll be like, dude, Josh Hart plays like shit. Right? It's the coach has control over this stuff. He can move the needle. We see it all the time. And he's not just getting outcoached by these teams. I thought he was outcoached yesterday by Steve Kerr pretty handily, especially in that second half. That was a joke. That was awful. But that's and you can be like, well, Steve Kerr is a great coach. These guys are great coaches. Well, that's the standard. That's who you have to be. You're not gonna face like the fucking Raptors every night. You're gonna face really good, talented teams that maybe even have more talent than you, and you're also going to face teams like that have great coaches. So you need to be a great team and a greatly coached team. And right now the Knicks do not look like a greatly coached team. They look like a team that has an idea of the things they do, sticks to what they do. They stick to the script, for better or worse. And that's that. They out talent teams. I don't think they're out tacticking teams, I guess if there's a way to put that. I don't think they're out thinking teams. I don't think that there's a creativity in our process that lends itself to giving us a natural advantage over opponents. I think we are simply more talented than a lot of our opponents. And if we don't get an improvement in terms of our process, our approach to games, our level of attention and detail in games, both offensively and defensively, then I feel pretty strongly that it should be time to move on from Thibs. And if they're not going to move on from Thibs, then it's definitely important and imperative that they bolster the assistant coaching staff, and in particular get an assistant coach in that you can believe in to some extent as an interim guy. Prepare for the possibility that you might need to move on from Thibs during the season next year if you bring him back. Because I get like even if Thibs was coaching so badly this season, I wanted him fired right now. There's nobody on the bench that I have confidence in to come in and just be like a competent, good assistant coach that would give us a chance to still push for whatever conference finals berth or whatever. I don't see that type of assistant coach that level of assistant coach on the bench right now for us. And obviously we had a lot of brain drain, so that makes sense. Okay. I think that is a decent place to end it. Is at this point I'm just rambling about nothing. Thank you to everybody for listening today. I apologize. Obviously we had an issue in between, so I'm sure Stacy will be fine. He just had something come up, so he had to peace out. But yeah, all right. That is our pod for today. Thank you to everybody for listening. Thank you to Bet Online for sponsoring. Me and Prez will probably be recording on Friday, so be on the lookout for that pod. Play the Lakers on Thursday night, so let's see how the Knicks respond because the Lakers have been on a tear. They look really good. Their defense has been stout for whatever reason, however they're doing it. And they beat the brakes off the Knicks even before they traded for Luka. Right? That was the last game before they traded for Luka. They traded for Luka that night. They beat the Knicks 128 to 112, if I remember correctly. So Knicks have plenty to clean up. It's a big road trip for them. We will have to wait on Karl-Anthony Towns. Hope everything with him is okay. But yeah, all right. Everybody enjoy the rest of your week, and I'll see you on Friday. Peace.